While Jerome Wilson built his billion-dollar empire, Emily, the daughter he abandoned, counted quarters for laundry money. Tonight, after serving him without recognition, she found 3 things under his plate: her birth certificate, a childhood photo, and a letter explaining why he would reject her twice in one lifetime. His $0 tip was just the beginning of his cruelty. Billionaire left a $0 tip, her co-worker Jade had whispered just minutes earlier, eyes dancing with malicious glee as she pointed to the deliberately marked $0 line on the leather check presenter. "What did you do to piss him off, Em?" But Emily couldn't hear her. The world had narrowed to the faded Polaroid showing her 5-year-old self in pigtails holding hands with a younger version of the stern-faced man who wouldn't meet her eyes tonight. The handwritten letter on heavy cream stationery burned against her fingers. "My dearest Emily, I recognized you instantly. Those eyes, that smile." The restaurant's ambient noise faded to silence. The weight of 2 decades of abandonment crashed down as she clutched the evidence of her origin story. The father who had chosen wealth and power over his firstborn child, who had built an empire while she and her mother struggled paycheck to paycheck. The dining room's soft lighting suddenly felt like a spotlight on her humiliation as coworkers whispered nearby. Emily's throat closed around a sob she couldn't release. The man who had ordered a $300 bottle of wine without glancing up from his phone once was Jerome Faulkner Wilson, her father, and he had just walked out of her life for the second time. The letter trembled in her grip. "I wanted to speak, to apologize, but seeing your quiet strength, I know I have no place in the life you've made. There will be no money, no inheritance, no further contact." His expensive cologne still clung to the air around the abandoned table, mingling with the scent of the gourmet meal he'd barely acknowledged, just as he'd never acknowledged her perfect service or her very existence during the 2 hours she'd attended to his every need. "Hello, my lovelies at Ducal Tales. I wonder where you're watching from tonight. Has your heart already broken for Emily? If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you join our Ducal family for this journey of betrayal, revelation, and healing." "Why now?" Emily whispered, her voice foreign to her own ears as the devastating truth settled into her bones. Why come back just to leave again? The porcelain plate she still clutched felt impossibly heavy, much like the weight of rejection pressing against her chest. After 26 years of wondering why she hadn't been enough to make him stay, Jerome Wilson had finally given her an answer. And it was worse than anything she could have imagined. What kind of father discovers his daughter serving tables and responds by deliberately leaving no tip at all? Emily slipped the letter, photo, and birth certificate into her apron pocket as Jade approached with a tray of dirty glasses. "Earth to Emily? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jade's voice softened when she noticed Emily's expression. "Hey, you okay?" Jade Martinez had been Emily's anchor since they'd started at Lumiere together 8 months ago. Where Emily was reserved and methodical, Jade was all vibrant energy and ready laughter. But beneath her friend's chaotic exterior beat a fiercely loyal heart that had seen Emily through countless late-night tears over unpaid bills and unanswered dreams. "I'm fine," Emily lied, forcing her trembling hands to steady as she stacked dessert forks. "Just tired." The kitchen doors swung open as Nathan Park, their floor manager, emerged with his perpetual clipboard. His eyes immediately found the empty table where the billionaire had sat. "Wilson just left? Jerome Faulkner Wilson." Nathan's voice dropped to a reverent whisper. "He owns half the waterfront. Did he say anything about the food?" Emily swallowed hard. "No, nothing at all. She didn't mention the 0 tip. Didn't mention how the man had barely acknowledged her existence for 2 hours. Didn't pull out the evidence burning against her hip that proved Jerome Wilson was more than just another wealthy patron. Emily had spent 26 years piecing together a life around the father-shaped void her mother refused to discuss. "He's not worth the breath it takes to say his name," Diane Taylor had repeated whenever young Emily had asked. Eventually, Emily stopped asking. At home in their small Brooklyn apartment, her mother had worked double nursing shifts to keep them afloat. Emily had learned early how to cook dinner, how to stretch groceries between paydays, how to be invisible when bill collectors called. What she'd never learned was how it felt to have a father's protection. The restaurant emptied as the last customers paid their checks. Emily moved mechanically through closing duties, her mind replaying every second of Wilson's visit. Had there been a moment of recognition in his eyes? A hesitation when she'd introduced herself? Something beyond the cold indifference of a man who'd accumulated more wealth than most could imagine? In the employee locker room, she finally allowed herself to sit on the wooden bench, legs suddenly too weak to support her. She removed the items from her pocket and spread them on her lap, studying the photo more carefully. The playground was familiar Central Park, near where she'd grown up. The man in the photo was laughing, one arm around a woman whose face had been carefully cut from the picture. Her mother, Emily realized. The only evidence of her was a single hand still visible, wedding ring catching the sunlight. "Closing time, ladies," Nathan called through the door. 15 minutes. Jade slumped onto the bench beside Emily, makeup scrubbed off to reveal the constellation of freckles she usually concealed. Her eyes widened at the items in Emily's lap. "What's all that?" Emily hesitated. The words felt impossible to say aloud. Speaking them would make them real. "You know that table 12? The billionaire who stiffed me." Her voice cracked. "He's my father." Jade's sharp intake of breath echoed in the empty locker room. "Holy shit, Em. Are you sure?" Emily handed over the letter with trembling fingers. As Jade read, Emily's mind drifted back to her tiny studio apartment in Queens, the one she could barely afford despite working 60-hour weeks. The stack of student loan statements she kept in a shoebox under her bed. The dream of finishing her nursing degree that seemed to drift further away with each passing month. Her entire life had been shaped by his absence. The strained holidays, the empty chair at graduations, the careful way her mother avoided father-daughter dances and school events. While Jerome Wilson had been building his empire, Emily and her mother had been counting quarters for laundry money. And now he had appeared just long enough to reject her a second time. "What are you going to do?" Jade asked, handing back the letter. Outside, the soft patter of rain began against the windows. Emily folded the letter and tucked it away, a strange calmness settling over her. She thought of her mother. Strong, resilient, unbroken despite everything. Diane Taylor hadn't needed Jerome Wilson to build a life worth living. Maybe Emily didn't either. But the question lingered as she stepped into the rain-slicked street. What would she do with the truth she now possessed? What did she want from the father who had walked away twice? And why, after all these years, had he chosen tonight to find her? 3 days after discovering the truth about Jerome Wilson, Emily sat across from her mother in their favorite diner. Sunlight streamed through dusty blinds, catching in the silver strands of Diane Taylor's still beautiful hair. At 52, she maintained the quiet dignity that had sustained them through years of struggle. "You're picking at your food," Diane noted, concern creasing her brow. "What's wrong, baby?" Emily had rehearsed this moment countless times, but now words failed her. Instead, she reached into her purse and placed the folded letter on the table between them. Diane's hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. "What's this?" "He came to the restaurant," Emily said softly. "Jerome Wilson." The color drained from her mother's face. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded the letter, eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. 20 years of carefully maintained composure crumbled in seconds. "I never told you because I wanted to protect you," Diane whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "He promised to send money when he left, every month like clockwork. Then one day, nothing. No explanation. No forwarding address." Emily reached for her mother's hand. "Why didn't you ever tell me who he was? By the time he became somebody, you were already a teenager. What was I supposed to say? Remember that father who abandoned us? He's a millionaire now, but he still doesn't want us." Diane shook her head. "I couldn't bear to watch you process that rejection twice." A notification lit up Emily's phone. An email from Wilson Enterprises Foundation. Subject line, employment opportunity. Emily stared at the screen, pulse quickening. "He's contacting me. After that cruel letter? What could he possibly want?" Diane's voice hardened. Emily opened the email. A formal invitation to interview for a position as Community Outreach Coordinator. Salary, 3 times what she made at the restaurant. The interview was scheduled for tomorrow morning. "He's offering me a job," she whispered. "After everything in that letter about no contact." "It's manipulation," Diane warned. "Don't trust him, Emily." The bell above the diner door chimed. Emily glanced up reflexively, then froze. A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit entered, his confident stride commanding attention. Not Jerome Wilson. This man was younger, perhaps early 30s, with the same steel-gray eyes but softer features. He scanned the diner, his gaze landing on Emily with startling recognition. He approached their table with purpose. "Emily Taylor?" His voice was deep, cultured. "I'm Alexander Wilson, Jerome's son, her half-brother, the legitimate heir she never knew existed." "I don't understand," Emily said, struggling to process this new shock. "The letter said nothing about." "My father doesn't know I'm here," Alexander interrupted, his expression unreadable. "In fact, he'd be furious if he knew. But there are things about Jerome Wilson, about your interview tomorrow, that you need to understand before you walk into his office." He placed a USB drive on the table. Security footage from the restaurant that night, and documents about the Taylor Foundation. "The what?" Emily asked. "A trust fund created 26 years ago in your name," Alexander said quietly, "with over $15 million that my father has been secretly managing since before I was born." Diane gasped. "That's impossible. He never." "The money didn't come from him," Alexander said, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "It came from my mother, your father's wife." The diner seemed to tilt around Emily as the ground beneath her certainties crumbled away. Everything she thought she knew about her father's abandonment, everything she believed about her place in the world, collapsed under the weight of this revelation. "Why would his wife create a trust for me?" Alexander's expression darkened. "That's what I need your help to discover. Because she died the day after she signed those papers, in what my father always claimed was an accident." The USB drive sat on Emily's kitchen counter like a live grenade. After Alexander had left the diner, leaving his business card with a hastily scribbled personal number, Emily and her mother had returned to Emily's apartment in silence, each lost in the maelstrom of revelations. "I shouldn't be seeing any of this," Diane whispered, her hands shaking as Emily connected the drive to her laptop. "If he's half as powerful as they say, we need to know," Emily countered, her voice steadier than she felt. "For 26 years, we've lived with his version of the truth." The screen flickered to life. A folder labeled Security contained time-stamped footage from Lumiere's dining room. Emily clicked on the file matching the night Jerome had visited. The camera angle captured their entire interaction from above. Jerome never looking directly at her. Emily's increasingly stiff posture as the night wore on, the moment he signed the receipt with its deliberate zero. "Look at him," Diane whispered. "He hasn't changed at all." But it was what happened after Emily walked away that made her breath catch. Jerome Wilson stared after her, his composed facade crumbling. His hand trembled as he withdrew the envelope containing the letter. For one unguarded moment, raw grief transformed his features before he carefully arranged his expression and left. "He wasn't cold," Emily murmured. "He was terrified." The next folder was labeled Cynthia. Inside were scanned documents, the trust paperwork showing Cynthia Wilson's signature beside Jerome's reluctant scrawl, newspaper clippings about her fatal car accident, and police reports with sections highlighted in angry red. "Guardrail failure unlikely at inspection cleared site," Emily read aloud. "Brake lines showed unusual where patterns consistent with tampering." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. "They suspected murder?" "The investigation was closed after 3 weeks," Emily said, scrolling through more documents. The lead detective was suddenly reassigned. The case never reached the district attorney. A final document made Emily's heart stutter. A handwritten letter from Cynthia Wilson dated 1 day before her death. "My dearest Jerome, I know about the child. I've always known. Your secret weighs on you like a cancer, and I won't let it destroy you any longer. I've made arrangements for her future that you cannot undo. This isn't a punishment, it's liberation. For all of us, with enduring love. Cynthia. Emily sat back, mind racing. She knew about me. She didn't hate me. She was helping me. And maybe someone killed her for it? Diane whispered. The chime of Emily's phone pierced the tension. Alexander Wilson. Did you review the files? His text read. Emily's fingers hovered over the screen. She should ignore him. Cancel the interview. Walk away from the Wilson family and all their dangerous secrets. Instead, she typed, Yes, I have questions. Not over text. Meet me at Riverside Park. 30 minutes. The evening air carried a chill as Emily spotted Alexander on a bench overlooking the Hudson. The setting sun burnished his profile in gold, highlighting how much he resembled the man from the Polaroid, their father in happier days. I'm risking everything by showing you those files, he said without preamble. Father has eyes everywhere. Why risk it? Emily asked, keeping her distance. What do you want from me? Alexander's gaze remained fixed on the water. The truth. I was 7 when my mother died. Father changed after, became colder, more driven. He raised me to take over the company, but kept me at arm's length. I never understood why until last year when I found my mother's journals. And they mentioned me? Not by name, but she wrote about his first family and how the guilt was destroying him. Alexander finally turned to her, his expression haunted. 2 days ago, he told me he's dying. Pancreatic cancer. Terminal. When I pressed him about his affairs, he mentioned making amends. The job offer, the restaurant visit, the letter. Pieces started shifting in Emily's mind. If you're right about your mother's death, Emily began carefully. Then my father may be a murderer, Alexander finished. Or he knows who is. Either way, I need to know before he takes the truth to his grave. And I'm supposed to help you. How exactly? Take the job, Alexander said. Get close to him. He'll never tell me the truth. I'm too much like her. But you. His eyes swept over her face. You remind him of someone he once loved enough to risk everything. Emily's phone buzzed with a reminder. 14 hours until the interview. This is insane, she said, rising from the bench. You're asking me to spy on one of the most powerful men in New York. A man who might be involved in murder. I'm asking you to help me find justice for my mother, Alexander countered, and maybe discover why he abandoned you. The weight of 26 years pressed down on Emily's shoulders. All the birthdays, graduations, and father-daughter dances that had passed in Jerome Wilson's absence. All the nights she'd heard her mother crying. All the times she'd wondered if there was something fundamentally unlovable about her that had made her father leave. Even if I wanted to help you, she said, I don't know the first thing about corporate espionage. Alexander reached into his coat and withdrew a small box. This looks like a normal lipstick, but it's actually a recording device. The files on the USB were just the beginning. I have resources, Emily. What I need is someone he won't suspect. She didn't take the device. And if I refuse? His expression softened. Then walk away. Forget everything I've shown you. Live your life. He paused. But ask yourself, don't you want to know why the man who wrote that letter is now inviting you into his world? What changed? The Hudson's dark waters reflected the city lights as Emily weighed impossible choices. The restaurant job barely covered her rent. The Wilson Enterprises position could help her finish her nursing degree. And beneath the practical concerns lay deeper questions that had haunted her entire life. I'll do the interview, she said finally. After that, I decide. No promises. Alexander nodded, relief flickering across his features. That's all I ask. As they parted ways, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she was stepping onto a chessboard where every piece was already in motion, and she couldn't tell if she was a player or merely a pawn. The Wilson Enterprises headquarters dominated the Manhattan skyline, 70 floors of gleaming glass and ambition. Emily stepped through revolving doors in the charcoal gray suit she'd splurged on yesterday. Alexander's lipstick recorder tucked into her bag untouched. She hadn't decided whether to use it. The elevator ascended with dizzying speed. Each floor represented another level of power she'd never known existed while growing up in Brooklyn's cramped apartments. Miss Taylor, a sleek assistant, greeted her on the executive floor. Mr. Wilson is ready for you. Not the father, the son. Alexander rose from behind a mahogany desk, his public persona firmly in place. Gone was the vulnerable man from the park bench, replaced by the polished heir apparent. Emily, thank you for coming. His handshake was firm, professional, a perfect performance for the security cameras he'd subtly indicated with a glance. Father sends his regrets. An urgent situation required his attention this morning. Disappointment and relief warred within her. I understand. I'll be conducting your initial interview. Alexander gestured to a chair. Your resume is impressive. Nearly finished nursing school before financial hardship. Exactly the perspective our community health initiatives need. The interview proceeded with textbook precision. Questions about her experience, her goals, her vision for community outreach. Emily answered mechanically, hyper-aware of the charade they were playing. One final question, Alexander said, checking his watch. Why Wilson Enterprises? You must have other options. Before Emily could formulate a safe answer, the office door opened. Jerome Wilson entered, his commanding presence instantly transforming the atmosphere. Thinner than he'd appeared at the restaurant, with a sallowness beneath his tan that spoke of his hidden illness. Alexander, the Tokyo call needs. Jerome stopped abruptly, his eyes finding Emily. The mask of professional detachment she'd practiced shattered. Face to face with the man who'd abandoned her, who'd left that devastating letter, whose blood ran through her veins. Emily couldn't breathe. Miss Taylor and I were just finishing, Alexander said smoothly. She's interviewing for the community outreach position. Jerome's eyes never left Emily's face. Leave us, Alexander. Father, I don't think. Now. Alexander departed with a warning glance at Emily. The door closed with an ominous click. Jerome circled his son's desk slowly. Why are you here? You invited me, Emily replied, finding her voice. The job offer. I made no such offer. His words fell like ice between them. Though I'm not surprised Alexander took such initiative. He's been quite investigative lately. Emily's pulse quickened. I don't understand. Don't you? Jerome withdrew a familiar object from his pocket. Alexander's recorder disguised as lipstick. Found in my son's desk this morning. Along with quite illuminating notes about you. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Emily. Mr. Wilson. He's using you, Jerome continued, his voice dangerously soft, to prove a theory about his mother's death. A death that has nothing to do with you. He showed me the trust documents, Emily countered. Cynthia Wilson created a fund for me the day before she died. That's not nothing. Something flickered in Jerome's eyes, surprise, perhaps. What else did he show you? Police reports suggesting her accident wasn't accidental. Her letter to you about knowing your secret. Jerome sank into a chair, suddenly looking every year of his age. My son believes I killed his mother because she discovered my first family. A bitter laugh escaped him. If only it were that simple. Then explain it to me, Emily demanded. Years of abandoned birthdays and father-daughter dances fueling her courage. You owe me that much. I owe you nothing, Jerome snapped. That letter I left explained everything you need to know. It explained nothing. You abandoned us, built an empire, then walked back into my life just to reject me again. Emily's voice broke. And now your son tells me your wife knew about me all along and wanted to help me. Who's lying? You? Him? Both of you. Jerome studied her with those familiar gray eyes, her eyes. Finally, he reached for his phone. Cancel my appointments for the next hour. He pressed another button on his desk, and window shades descended electronically, sealing them in privacy. Cynthia did create that trust, he admitted. Not out of kindness, but manipulation. Insurance that I would never leave her for your mother. My mother never wanted you back, Emily said. Diane was too proud to say otherwise. Jerome's expression softened momentarily. But she did. We reconnected briefly when you were 5. I was prepared to leave everything for her. Emily struggled to process this revelation. But you didn't. Cynthia discovered our meetings. She threatened to take Alexander and destroy both our lives unless I cut all contact with you and your mother. He unlocked a hidden drawer in Alexander's desk, removing a yellowed envelope. She wrote this letter to Diane. I never delivered it. With trembling fingers, Emily opened the envelope. Diane, it read, your continued involvement with my husband must end. I've created a trust for your daughter with the understanding that you will disappear permanently. If you contact Jerome again, I will ensure you lose custody of Emily through whatever means necessary. My husband belongs with his legitimate family. The enclosed check should ease any financial concerns while you establish yourselves elsewhere. She was blackmailing my mother? Emily whispered. And me, Jerome corrected. The trust wasn't a gift, it was a chain. If I ever attempted to contact you, the trustees would void the fund entirely. But she died, and the trust provisions remained. Until last month, when I finally gained control after decades of legal maneuvering. Jerome's expression darkened. Alexander doesn't know this part. He found fragments of truth and constructed a narrative that fits his need to canonize his mother. Emily's world tilted again. So you didn't kill her? Jerome's face contorted with genuine shock. Is that what he told you? That I murdered my wife. He suggested it was possible. Cynthia's death was exactly what the final police report stated. A tragic accident. Jerome leaned forward. The initial investigators were overzealous, seeing conspiracy where there was none. I had the investigation reassigned to more competent detectives. Or you paid them off, Emily countered. Believe what you will. Jerome rose, pacing to the window. But consider this, if I wanted Cynthia gone, why wait until after she created a trust that effectively separated me from you and your mother forever? The logic pierced through Emily's suspicions. She stared at the man silently watching her from across the room. The stranger who was her father, whose blood ran through her veins, whose absence had shaped her entire life. Why contact me now? She finally asked. After all these years? Jerome's expression changed, vulnerability replacing his careful control. I'm dying, Emily. Pancreatic cancer. 6 months at most. The words hung in the air between them. I came to the restaurant to see you. Just once. I never intended for you to know who I was. His voice roughened. But seeing you there, so much like your mother, so strong despite everything. I couldn't just walk away again without some explanation. So you left that cruel letter instead? Saying you were abandoning me twice. I left the truth as I understood it, Jerome replied. What I didn't expect was Alexander finding my drafts, connecting the dots to you, and orchestrating this elaborate scenario to prove his mother was murdered. Emily struggled to breathe as the full weight of these revelations crashed down on her. Alexander had manipulated her, using her pain and curiosity to further his own agenda. Jerome had abandoned her, first through coercion, then by choice when he could have fought for her. And now he was dying. What happens next? She whispered. Jerome moved toward the door. That depends entirely on you. My dearest viewers at Ducal Tales, I can almost feel your hearts racing alongside Emily's. This family's secrets run deeper than any of us imagined. Has Alexander been manipulating Emily all along? Is Jerome telling the truth about Cynthia's death? And with Jerome's terminal diagnosis, what choices will Emily make with the precious little time remaining? I'd love to know your thoughts on Emily's journey so far. The twists and revelations are only beginning. If you haven't subscribed to our Ducal family yet, now is the perfect moment to join us. You won't want to miss what happens next in this tale of long-buried truths and second chances. Your subscription helps bring these emotional stories to life, and I promise the coming revelations will leave you breathless. Emily fled Wilson Enterprises without a backward glance, Jerome's final words echoing in her mind. That depends entirely on you. The gleaming tower that had represented possibility hours earlier now felt like a monument to betrayal. Rain pelted against her as she walked aimlessly through Midtown, her carefully selected interview suit soaking through. Her phone buzzed incessantly. Alexander, calling again and again. She finally shut it off. Both men had used her. Alexander had deployed her pain like a weapon in his quest for truth about his mother. Jerome had abandoned her for decades, only reaching out when death loomed on his horizon. What did either of them truly want from her, besides using her as a pawn in their private war? By the time Emily reached her apartment, darkness had fallen both outside and within her. Diane sat waiting, hope written across her features. How did it go? Did you see him? Emily stood dripping in the doorway, unable to form words that wouldn't shatter her mother. Finally, she handed over Cynthia Wilson's letter to Diane, the letter that rewrote their shared history. Diane read it twice before looking up, her face ashen. I never received this. Because Jerome never delivered it, Emily said flatly. He claims Cynthia blackmailed him into staying away from us, that the trust was her insurance policy, not her generosity. And you believe him? I don't know what to believe anymore. Emily sank onto the couch, exhaustion claiming her. Alexander thinks Jerome killed Cynthia. Jerome says it was an accident. They're both using me to validate their versions of the truth. Diane sat beside her daughter, taking her cold hands. What do you want, Emily? Not what they want. What do you want? The question pierced through Emily's confusion. What did she want? The father she'd never had was dying. The brother she'd never known was possibly dangerous. The money that should have supported her education had been locked away as a twisted form of control. I want. Her voice broke. I want none of this to be happening. I want to go back to before he walked into the restaurant. We can't go back, Diane said gently. But we can walk away. We survived without Jerome Wilson for 26 years. We can keep surviving. Emily's phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. With trembling fingers, she turned it back on to find messages from Alexander, from the Wilson Enterprises HR department, offering her the position regardless of the interrupted interview. And this final message. Miss Taylor, I've transferred $100,000 to your account as a gesture of goodwill. No strings attached. The job remains available should you want it. My office door remains open. JFW. Emily showed her mother the message. He's trying to buy me now. Diane's expression hardened. After everything, I checked my account. The money's already there. Emily laughed hollowly. 26 years without child support. And now he thinks he can just. Her phone rang again. Alexander. You should hear him out, Diane said unexpectedly. Both of them. Get the full picture before you decide. Why? So they can manipulate me more. So you can finally know the truth. Diane squeezed her daughter's hand. You've spent your entire life with questions about your father. Now you have a chance to get answers, real answers, while he's still alive. Before Emily could respond, an email notification appeared. The subject line froze her blood. What Jerome Wilson doesn't want you to see. With shaking fingers, she opened it. Alexander had sent security footage from Jerome's private office from earlier that day, after Emily had left. In it, Jerome made a phone call. She knows too much. Alexander has filled her head with nonsense about Cynthia. Yes, the same approach as before. The trust should keep her quiet. But if not, no, nothing traceable. Make it look accidental, like mother, like daughter. Diane gasped. Is this real? I don't know, Emily whispered. It could be manipulated. Alexander works in technology. Another email arrived. This one from Jerome. Don't trust anything Alexander sends you. He's become unstable. The company's security team has discovered he's been doctoring videos. For your safety, please contact me directly. Emily's phone clattered to the floor. Two men claiming the other was dangerous, both offering money and opportunity while warning against the other. Her chest tightened until breathing became nearly impossible. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't be what either of them wants. A knock at the door startled them both. Through the peephole, Emily saw a man in a dark suit, one she recognized from Wilson Enterprises security. "Miss Taylor?" he called through the door. "Mr. Wilson sent me to ensure your safety." "Which Mr. Wilson?" she called back, panic rising. The man hesitated just a beat too long. "Jerome Wilson, ma'am." Another text flashed on her phone, from Alexander. "Don't open the door. That's not our security. Run. Now." Emily backed away, grabbing her mother's arm. "We need to leave. Now." "What's happening?" Diane whispered. "I don't know," Emily admitted, terror clawing at her throat as she led her mother toward the fire escape. "But I'm not waiting around to find out." As they slipped out the window, the apartment door splintered open behind them. Whatever game the Wilson men were playing had just turned deadly, and Emily had become the prize they both seemed willing to kill for. "Get in!" The silver Audi screeched to a halt beside them 3 blocks from Emily's apartment. Alexander leaned across the passenger seat, his face taut with urgency. Emily hesitated, one arm protectively around her mother. "Why should we trust you?" she demanded. "Because right now, I'm your only option." He gestured to the rearview mirror where a black SUV turned the corner. "Those aren't Wilson Enterprises security. They're private contractors father uses for sensitive situations." Emily made a split-second decision, ushering her mother into the back seat before climbing in front. The car accelerated the moment her door closed. "Where are you taking us?" Diane asked, her voice remarkably steady despite everything. "Somewhere safe." Alexander navigated through side streets with practiced efficiency. "A place father doesn't know about." Emily studied his profile, searching for deception. "The security footage you sent, was it real?" "Yes, though father will claim otherwise." "And the men breaking into my apartment?" Alexander's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "That's what happens when Jerome Wilson feels threatened. I've seen it before." They drove in tense silence until reaching a converted warehouse in Brooklyn. Inside, the industrial space had been transformed into a luxurious loft with state-of-the-art security. "My private sanctuary," Alexander explained, disarming the system. "Not even the company knows I own this property." "You've been planning this for a long time," Emily observed. Alexander moved to a sophisticated computer setup. "Ever since I found my mother's journals last year. She knew father was dangerous. That's why she created your trust. Not as blackmail, but as protection." "That's not what Jerome told me." "Of course not." Alexander handed her a leather-bound journal. "Read it yourself." The pages contained Cynthia Wilson's elegant handwriting. "Jerome grows more distant each day. I've discovered his other family, a woman he truly loves and their daughter. I cannot hate them. They are as much his victims as I am. I've established a trust for the child using my inheritance. Jerome is furious, but I will not relent. Some part of me hopes this act might be my redemption for staying in a marriage built on ambition rather than love." The final entry, dated the day before her death. "I've told Jerome I'm leaving, taking Alexander away from this poisoned life. He became someone I no longer recognize. I fear what he might do, but cannot live in fear any longer." Emily's hands trembled. "This contradicts everything he told me." "Father is dying," Alexander said softly. "He's desperate to rewrite his legacy, to make peace with his sins without actually confessing them. Or you're manipulating these journals to frame him," Emily countered. Alexander didn't flinch. "Fair assessment. Trust nothing without verification." He unlocked a hidden safe, removing a small flash drive. "This is my insurance policy. Financial records showing how father systematically drained your trust over decades. Police interviews never made public about my mother's death. And this." He played an audio recording. Jerome's unmistakable voice filled the room. "I made a mistake with the Taylor girl. Should have remained anonymous. Alexander's making connections I can't afford. Handle it discreetly." Another voice responded, "And if she's already talked to your son? Then handle them both. Make it untraceable." I'm not losing everything I've built over ancient history. Diane gasped. Emily felt ice spreading through her veins. When was this recorded? She demanded. Yesterday, after your interview. Alexander's face was grim. I've spent my life watching Father eliminate problems. I refused to be next, and I couldn't let him hurt you. For the first time, Emily saw genuine fear in Alexander's eyes. Not calculation or manipulation, but the same terror she felt, of a powerful man who viewed them both as inconveniences to be erased. What do we do now? Diane asked, her voice small. Emily stood straighter, something crystallizing within her. For 26 years, she defined herself by Jerome Wilson's absence, shaped her identity around being unwanted, abandoned. But in that moment, clarity dawned. We stop reacting and start acting, she said firmly. We've been playing their game, Jerome's and Alexander's both. It's time to change the rules. She turned to her half-brother, seeing him truly for the first time, not as Jerome Wilson's son or her manipulator, but as another person damaged by the same man. You have financial records proving he stole from my trust? Emily asked. Alexander nodded. Millions. Enough for securities fraud charges. And evidence about your mother's death? Circumstantial, but compelling. Emily took a deep breath. The waitress who had felt powerless at Jerome's table now replaced by a woman claiming her power. Then let's use it. Not for revenge, for justice. For your mother. For mine. She glanced at Diane, who nodded encouragement. And for ourselves. Light returned to Alexander's eyes, hope replacing fear. How? First, Emily said, we stop running. It's time Jerome Wilson faces everything he's been hiding from. The Wilson Foundation Annual Gala transformed the Metropolitan Museum of Art into a glittering showcase of wealth and influence. New York's elite mingled beneath Renaissance masterpieces, champagne flutes clinking as millions were pledged to charitable causes, all bearing the Wilson name. Jerome Wilson stood at the center of it all, the picture of philanthropic dignity in his tuxedo. If death stalked him, it remained invisible beneath his perfectly maintained facade. Are you sure about this? Alexander asked, adjusting his bow tie as they watched from the museum's grand entrance. Once we do this, there's no going back. Emily smoothed the midnight blue gown Alexander had procured for her, a dress befitting a Wilson, not a waitress. Beside her, Diane wore a simple but elegant black dress, her quiet strength a steadying presence. I've spent my entire life living in the shadow of his absence, Emily replied. It's time to step into the light. They had prepared meticulously over the past 48 hours. Financial records, audio recordings, journal entries, all organized into irrefutable evidence of Jerome's decades of manipulation. The flash drive in Alexander's pocket contained everything, copies already secured with trusted attorneys who would release it all should anything happen to them. Jerome spotted them first. His champagne glass froze halfway to his lips, his practiced smile faltering momentarily before recovering. He excused himself from the mayor and approached with measured steps. What an unexpected family reunion, he said smoothly. Alexander, I've been trying to reach you. I've been busy, Alexander replied, uncovering the truth about Mother's accident and Emily's trust. Jerome's eyes darted to nearby guests. This is hardly the venue for family discussions. Actually, Emily countered, it's the perfect venue. Public, witnesses, security cameras, all the things that make it difficult to arrange accidents or send men to break down doors. A muscle twitched in Jerome's jaw. You misunderstand. No, Emily interrupted, her voice steady despite her racing heart. For the first time, I understand perfectly. You abandoned my mother and me because it was convenient. You stole millions from the trust your wife created to protect me. And when Alexander and I started comparing notes, you tried to eliminate both problems at once. Jerome's expression hardened. Whatever Alexander has told you, I've heard your own words, Emily said. We have the recordings, the financial records, your wife's journals, everything. Something shifted in Jerome's eyes, calculation replacing charm. What do you want? Money? The trust restored? Name your price. Emily stepped closer, close enough to see the yellowing whites of his eyes. Evidence of the cancer consuming him from within. I want the truth, she said simply. No more manipulation. No more lies. For once in your life, Jerome, be honest about who you really are. The museum's soaring ceiling and marble floors seemed to hold their breath as Jerome Wilson, titan of industry, master manipulator, faced the daughter he had twice abandoned. The truth, he echoed, something crumbling behind his practiced facade. The truth is I was a coward. I loved your mother, but I loved power more. Cynthia knew it. She created that trust not as blackmail, but as protection from me. He turned to Alexander. Your mother was the better person. She threatened to leave me to expose my double life. I didn't arrange her accident, but his voice faltered. I felt relieved when it happened. What kind of monster feels relief at his wife's death? The admission hung in the air between them. And the men at Emily's apartment? Alexander pressed. A mistake, Jerome admitted. Panic. The cancer diagnosis has made me desperate to clean up my messes before the end. I thought I could control the narrative one last time. Emily studied the man before her. Not the towering figure who had haunted her imagination, but a dying man clutching at legacy like a life raft. I don't forgive you, she said quietly, but I don't need to hate you either. What I need is to be free of you, of your absence, your manipulation, your power. She withdrew papers from her clutch. Documents Alexander's attorneys had prepared. These restore my trust with interest. Acknowledge me publicly as your daughter. And transfer control of the Wilson Foundation to a board that includes Alexander, myself, and independent trustees. You're asking for my entire legacy, Jerome said, disbelief coloring his voice. I'm asking you to finally do the right thing, Emily corrected. Sign these papers and the evidence stays private. Your reputation remains intact. Refuse, and by morning, every news outlet in the country will know exactly who Jerome Faulkner Wilson really is. For a moment, the great man seemed to deflate before their eyes. Then, with trembling fingers that betrayed his illness more than any confession could, he reached for the pen Alexander offered. You would have made a formidable Wilson, Jerome murmured as he signed page after page. Emily watched him, a strange calm settling over her. I already am one. I just never needed your name to prove it. As Jerome handed back the signed documents, a weight lifted from Emily's shoulders. Not forgiveness, but something equally powerful. Freedom. The absent father who had defined her life through missing pieces no longer held that power. She had reclaimed her story. 6 months later, the Wilson Foundation headquarters buzzed with purpose. Emily's office overlooked the same Manhattan skyline that had once intimidated her, though she viewed it differently now, not as a symbol of power beyond her reach, but as a landscape she was actively reshaping. The door opened as Alexander entered, coffee cups in hand. Their working relationship had evolved into something neither could have predicted, a genuine sibling bond forged through shared trauma and common purpose. The East Brooklyn Clinic funding is approved, he announced, placing her latte on the desk. Construction begins next month. Emily smiled, taking in her half-brother's transformation. Gone was the haunted, suspicious man who had once manipulated her into his investigation. In his place stood a partner dedicated to reforming their father's legacy into something truly meaningful. Mom's excited to help with the nursing program, Emily said, glancing at the photo on her desk. Diane in her new position as Director of Community Health Training. Jerome Wilson had died 3 weeks after the gala confrontation, slightly sooner than his doctors had predicted, as though surrendering his secrets had accelerated his decline. The man who had lived his final years consumed by fear of exposure was laid to rest with surprising dignity. His funeral attended by the children he had wronged and ultimately, in his final act, tried to make right. He had kept his word. The trust had been restored with interest. Emily's position as co-chair of the Wilson Foundation had been announced at the gala, sending shock waves through New York society. Most importantly, the truth about Cynthia Wilson's death had finally been properly investigated, confirming what Alexander had suspected but couldn't prove. An accident, not murder, but one whose investigation had been deliberately curtailed through Jerome's influence. "Have you decided about nursing school?" Alexander asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. Emily nodded. "I'm finishing my degree part-time. The foundation needs me, but so do the patients." The foundation work filled a part of Emily's soul that had always yearned to make a difference. The clinics they were building in underserved neighborhoods would provide care to thousands who had previously fallen through the cracks of the healthcare system. What Jerome had built through ambition and manipulation, his children were transforming through compassion and purpose. A text message lit up Emily's phone, from Nathan at Lumiere, the restaurant manager who had become something more in recent months. Their dinner date tonight would mark 3 months together. A relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection, unrushed and unhurried. "You're smiling," Alexander observed. "Nathan again?" Emily tucked the phone away, happiness warming her from within. "He wants to know if I'm still up for trying that new fusion place tonight." "Go," Alexander insisted. "The quarterly reports can wait until tomorrow." As Emily gathered her things to leave, she paused at the window, taking in the city stretching before her. The same skyline that had once seemed to represent everything she couldn't have now belonged to her too. Not through inheritance or manipulation, but through her own strength and choices. The daughter who had once cleared tables now directed millions toward healthcare for the underserved. The woman who had once felt defined by abandonment now chose her own path forward. The void that Jerome Wilson had created through his absence had been filled not by his belated acknowledgement, but by Emily's own sense of purpose and the family she had both been born to and created for herself. "You know," Alexander said softly, "Cynthia would have loved you, really loved you." Emily smiled, a peace settling over her that felt both earned and genuine. "I think I would have loved her too." As she stepped into the spring sunshine, Emily carried not the burden of the past but the promise of the future. One she was building on her own terms, with her mother's strength, her half-brother's loyalty, and her own unwavering determination. The Wilson name, once a symbol of everything she lacked, had become a tool for creating the change she had always wanted to see in the world. But it was her name now, too, claimed not through birth or belated recognition, but through the power of her own choices and the legacy she was creating. My dearest ducal family, Emily's journey from abandoned daughter to powerful changemaker reminds us that our worth isn't determined by those who leave us, but by the strength we find within ourselves. Has a moment of unexpected truth ever changed your life's direction? Tell me in the comments how this story touched your heart. And if you haven't yet joined our ducal family, subscribe now for more tales of redemption, justice, and healing that await you.